Good morning.
Hi.
Should I call you Gesshin for this purposes of this?
Sure.
Good.
Can I call you Odo for the purpose
You
of
can call
this?
me Odo if you want. Um, let's talk about Buddhism and monasticism and things. Let's see. Just yesterday, I was writing the introduction for this book that I'm trying to put together that we've talked about before. And part of what I wanted to do is explain to readers my concept of Buddhism. And it's about sort of lay practice, as it's been called. And I find that a lot of people are put off by the kind of institutionalization of Buddhist practice, and they see monasticism as number one, necessary for Buddhist practice, and number two, impossible for them. Um, and so what I'm trying to present is a different sort of possibility. So how long have you been a monastic? Was it 5 years, did you say?
No. Um, about December will be 4 years.
4 years.
Yeah.
So let's get your story. I mean, I heard a little bit about it in Tassajara, but we didn't get it on tape. How did you how did you become a Buddhist nun? What course of events ended up with you having that shaved head and those black robes?
Well, these are green robes,
Are
but
they? I can't tell.
yeah, the lighting is tricky. Um, I didn't plan on going. I didn't plan on becoming a nun in Japan. It wasn't my goal. I was interested in Buddhism for a long time in college, and I went to India and studied Buddhism there, and looked for a teacher there, and it didn't work out for various reasons. And after college, I was sort of drifting, and I was working in India again, teaching English, and I really hated that. And so I quit and I left, and I went to visit a friend in Japan who was studying Japanese there, and he had stayed in a monastery for a year, and I really liked it and really liked the teacher. So I went and stayed there for 6 months, and it was an interesting time for me to go because this monastery had been abandoned for like 40 years, and it had filled up with like bat poop, and like everything was falling apart. So the abbot there had just sort of in the last couple of years started to renovate it, and it had just become a monastery within like a year of me getting there.
Mm-hmm.
So when I got there were two Japanese monks and one Australian nun, and the abbot and me, and that was it. And then the Australian nun left, and so it was just me and like three Japanese monks there for 6 months, and I did that, and then I couldn't get a visa, and I went back to America and tried to move on with my life, and I couldn't because I kept thinking about the monastery and how I was happy there. So even though I probably wasn't happy there, it was just some invented idea of me being happy. But so I went back with the idea of that happiness, and it just sort of progressed to this point.
Well, what do you do? What's a monastic day like in a typical day in a Japanese monastery that you've been at?
Well, you wake up at 4 a.m. and you sit either. I mean, I practiced at two different training monasteries. Either you sit one period of zazen or two, and then you have a chanting service, which is anywhere from like 20 minutes to an hour and a half. At Nisoto, they were pretty long, like an hour and a half. And then you have a little cleaning period, and then oryoki breakfast, and then work or class, and then chanting and lunch, and then depending on the place, you might have a break or you might not, and then work and class, and service and dinner and than zazen.
So, are you allowed to leave when you're there? I mean, could you, if you have free time and you want to go buy a candy bar in town, a Meiji bar? I used to love those. Can you do that, or are you kind of restricted?
Well, I practiced two places. One was in the mountains, so it wasn't like you couldn't walk anywhere, even if you couldn't find a candy bar, even if you wanted to. And in Nagoya, Nisoto was in the middle of the city, and it was pretty strict. You could, in theory, leave. You had to ask the person in charge of you. You had to ask your boss, basically, if you could go out. And nobody ever said, "I want to go buy a candy bar." You always have to like make up, like, I'm gonna go to the post office, or it's always like, I'm going to the post office, the drugstore, or the hospital.
Yeah.
These are the three accepted things. And then sort of on the way, you would go to, buy food for yourself. But
Interesting.
I didn't leave so often, about once a week or twice a week.
So, what about that life appealed to you? I suppose it's a basic question. It seems like you have to think about it, but
appealed, like in the past.
I mean, there must be something that made you choose that, because it wasn't. You were like a lot of people get into, as you know, the position of going to training monasteries and becoming monks in Japan because they have to. Their dad was a priest and ran a temple, and now they have to run the temple. So damn it, here I am. But you obviously chose it. You said, don't want to do this. I don't want to live in San Francisco. I want to live in this monastery. Why?
Why? I think because I noticed that it was beneficial to my mental health in a weird, paradoxical way, because it's so hard. Like, and this is the thing people don't understand that I can't explain. Like, when I talk about my experience, everyone's like, why would you want to do that?
Yeah.
And it doesn't really make any sense to me why it would be very stabilizing. But it is very stabilizing to me. And it makes me happy.
That's great. I like the face you make when you say that.
It doesn't make any sense why it would do that. But
well, it's interesting because my Buddhist upbringing, was, for want of a better way to put it, was that I kind of fell into it by accident, and then I had two different teachers, neither of whom was monastic. I think Tim had spent a bit of time. He lived at San Francisco Zen Center for a very short time, and was a jisha to Kobanchino, who was a teacher there, but not monastic living. And then Nishijima Roshi in Japan, who I studied with, was kind of. I wouldn't go so far as to say he was against monasticism, but he was very much pro a different way, which means he never sort of railed against, or said monasticism is bad or anything, but he was very much interested in integrating it with a regular life. So he would I remember having this conversation with him about, should I quit my job and go join a monastery? I was like tearful and, just going, oh, this is horrible. And he told me no. He said I should keep my job and not go monastic. So I don't know if there's a question there. I'm just sort of putting that out as a possible topic for further discussion.
Well, I mean, I think there are many ways, and there have always been many ways, and the Buddha talked about the fourfold sangha of monks and nuns and laymen and laywomen, and that all of those are valid paths. So I think what works for one person might not work for somebody else, and I think that there are always going to be people who want to be a monk or a nun. There are always been people who want to do that, and there will always be people who want to do that. But that doesn't mean that everybody's going to want to do that.